Imagine this. A golden retriever, calm and leashed, padding gently along the winding paths of Westlake Park, the morning sun casting a warm, lazy glow over the sleepy Texas suburb. Families set up picnics, toddlers chase bubbles, retirees walk, hand in hand. It's the kind of day that feels untouched by tragedy. But in an instant that peace shatters. A gunshot cracks through the air. People scream. A dog yelps and collapses. Phones whip out of pockets. Children cry. Parents pull them close. The shooter? A uniformed police officer, gun still smoking, face pale with shock. And within hours, the town of Westlake would learn a fact that made their blood run cold. The dog he shot wasn't just anyone's pet. It belonged to Chuck Norris. Welcome to Storyroom by Rico. Subscribe, hit the bell. Let us know where in the world you are watching from. And let's dive in. Westlake, Texas. A town of manicured lawns, horse pastures, and endless sunny afternoons. It had a reputation for being the kind of place where neighbors left their doors unlocked, where the biggest scandal of the year might be someone's mailbox getting knocked over by a teenager on a dare. Chuck Norris, the man who could take down a movie villain with a single look, lived here peacefully. He wasn't Chuck Norris legend in Westlake. He was Chuck, the man who smiled at the farmer's market, who waved from his front porch. His dog Max was just as beloved, an 8-year-old golden retriever with a gentle soul. Max often accompanied Chuck on his morning strolls, leash firmly in hand, wagging his tail at every passerby. That Sunday, Chuck had sent Max to the park with Rosa Delgado, their housekeeper of 15 years. Rosa was part of the Norris family. She'd raised Chuck's kids alongside her own. She knew Max like her own child. No one could have foreseen what would happen next. Officer Paul Redding wasn't from Westlake. He'd been transferred from the Dallas Police Department just 2 months prior, after administrative difficulties that were whispered about but never officially disclosed. Locals found him brash, edgy, not quite fitting into their peaceful rhythms. That morning, Redding received a call. Suspicious person near Westlake Park. Anonymous. Vague. Redding rolled up in his cruiser, sunlight reflected off the polished badge pinned to his chest. His fingers drummed nervously on the steering wheel as he scanned the park. There, a woman kneeling beside a dog, tying her shoe. Redding's mind raced. Suspicious, possible threat. He swung the door open. In seconds, he was out of the car, one hand on his holster. Witnesses say he shouted something unintelligible, his voice cracking with tension. Rosa looked up, startled. Max's leash was still looped tightly around her wrist. The golden retriever lifted his head, tail wagging, oblivious to danger. Then, the shot. Max crumpled into the grass. Rosa screamed, a heart-wrenching sound that echoed across the park. Parents shielded their children. Joggers stopped mid-stride. Phones recorded the chaos. And Officer Redding stood frozen, gun lowered, eyes wide, as if he couldn't quite believe what he'd done. Within minutes, Westlake PD's radios exploded with chatter. Officer-involved shooting, but no armed suspect. A dog, a leashed, non-threatening, beloved dog. Rosa cradled Max's lifeless body, rocking back and forth in the grass, sobbing. Neighbors rushed to comfort her, horror etched into their faces. When backup arrived, Redding mumbled a shaky justification. The dog. He was coming at me. But by then the first video clips were already hitting Facebook and Twitter. Max on a leash, Max wagging his tail. Max shot in cold blood. And then, the bombshell. Comments flooded in as Max's identity became known. Not just any dog. Chuck Norris's dog. The town's shock turned to outrage, and the media storm was only just beginning. Sheriff Ellen Martinez got the call at noon. Within 10 minutes, she was on scene. Ellen had been sheriff of Westlake for 20 years, tough as nails, zero tolerance for injustice. She took one look at the footage handed to her by a frantic teenager and knew she was standing at the epicenter of something that would rock her town's foundations. "Secure the scene," she ordered, "and get internal affairs on the line. Now." Public trust hung by a thread. Martinez knew she had to move fast. Dashcam footage from Redding's cruiser was pulled. Bodycam? Disabled. Accidentally, Redding claimed. But the dashcam told enough. There was no aggressive lunge, no menacing bark. Just a loyal dog, a startled woman, and a panicked cop making a fatal mistake. And in that moment, Ellen Martinez made a silent vow. She would not let this be swept under the rug. By nightfall, the quiet streets of Westlake were alive with fury. Hundreds gathered outside the sheriff's office. They held candles. They carried signs. Justice for Max. Protect, don't kill. Accountability now. Chuck Norris, flanked by his sons and longtime friends, addressed the crowd personally. His voice cracked. Only once. Max was family. He trusted us to keep him safe. We failed him, but we won't fail again. The video of his speech went viral by midnight, and what no one realized yet was that beneath the heartbreak and rage, darker truths were already beginning to surface, truths that would make even Westlake's staunchest defenders question how safe their town really was. If you think this story couldn't get crazier, stay tuned. Subscribe to Storyroom by Rico and hit the bell. The shocking truth is just unfolding. By the next morning, Westlake wasn't just angry, it was burning with questions. The media had descended like vultures. Reporters from Dallas, Houston, even New York, crowded outside the Norris property, outside the sheriff's office, outside Westlake Park itself. It seemed impossible that this quiet, idyllic town was now at the center of a national firestorm. Sheriff Ellen Martinez, seasoned and steady, knew the pressure was mounting. Her office released a statement promising a full and impartial investigation. But inside, Ellen worried. She knew this wasn't just about one rogue officer. This was about trust, and whether Westlake could ever get it back. Internal Affairs wasted no time pulling Officer Paul Redding's files. What they found was deeply troubling. 3 years earlier, Redding had been involved in a questionable shooting in Dallas. A teenager accused of shoplifting, shot in the leg during a struggle. The teen had survived, but the city quietly settled the lawsuit. Redding had received a performance improvement plan, but nothing more. Later that year, 2 excessive force complaints followed. Dashcam footage from one incident showed Redding yanking a woman from her car during a routine traffic stop, slamming her onto the hood with no provocation. Again, a slap on the wrist. Dallas PD had been looking to transfer him out quietly, and Westlake, desperate for officers, had taken the bait. Ellen's stomach turned as she read the reports. How had they let this man slip through? Meanwhile, civilians, who had been at the park that morning, lined up to give statements. The stories matched. No growling, no charging, no threat. Bethany Jameson, a young mother who had been picnicking nearby, sobbed as she spoke to deputies. Max. He just wagged his tail. He didn't even bark. He'd gone to sniff Rosa's hand. And then, bang, local teens uploaded more footage. Different angles, clearer audio, Rosa's terrified screams. Max's confused, trusting eyes in the seconds before the shot. One video, slowed down, captured something chilling. Officer Redding's hand trembling on the trigger. A man not in control of himself. Chuck Norris, heartbreak visible in every line. Of his face, called a press conference. Standing before a wall of microphones with Rosa beside him, he spoke quietly but firmly. This isn't just about Max. This is about every family who trusts their public servants to act with restraint and compassion. This is about accountability. He paused, looking out at the sea of cameras. Max was leashed. Max was loved. And Max deserved better. The nation listened. Sympathy poured in. From celebrities, from animal rights organizations, from police reform advocates. Westlake was no longer just a town. It was a symbol. A confidential psychological evaluation. Ordered. As part of Redding's hiring came to light, the report painted a troubling picture: heightened reactivity to perceived threats, impulse control issues. Recommendation: should not be placed in positions requiring regular civilian interaction without ongoing supervision and counseling. Westlake PD had missed it, or worse, ignored it. Sheriff Martinez felt her hands clench into fists as she reviewed the findings. She had vouched for every officer in her department. Now she felt betrayed by her own system. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a systemic failure. Facing mounting evidence, Redding sat down for a recorded internal affairs interview. He looked haggard, bloodshot eyes, twitching hands. "I saw him coming at me," he mumbled. "Big, fast." The investigator leaned forward. "You mean the dog? The leashed golden retriever wagging his tail?" Redding's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words came out. At that moment, everyone in the room understood. He didn't even know why he'd pulled the trigger. His mind had conjured a threat, where none existed, and an innocent life was the cost. By the end of the second day, Ellen Martinez made the call. Redding was placed on unpaid suspension pending the outcome of criminal charges. An independent civilian review board was formed. An external prosecutor was brought in to avoid conflicts of interest. Westlake was tearing itself apart. Some wanted immediate arrest. Others argued for due process. But nearly everyone agreed. The town they thought they knew was gone. And underneath the grief, anger, and fear, a darker current began to flow. Because late that evening, Sheriff Martinez's chief investigator, a man named J.T. McAllister, made a discovery that changed everything. The 911 call that had brought Redding to Westlake Park, it hadn't come from a concerned citizen at all. It had come from a burner phone. And when they traced the purchase, they found a name on the receipt that made Sheriff Martinez's blood run cold. Paul Redding. Want to know how deep this cover-up goes? Hit subscribe to Storyroom by Rico and buckle in. What happens next will leave you speechless. Sheriff Ellen Martinez stared at the receipt in her hands, her mind racing. Paul Redding had bought the burner phone 2 days before the shooting, paid cash, left no digital footprint except for a faint security camera image showing him in a baseball cap and sunglasses at a strip mall convenience store. The implications were staggering. Redding had staged the suspicious person call that led him to Rosa and Max. This wasn't a tragic split-second mistake. This was premeditated. Internal affairs and the Texas Rangers quickly converged on Westlake. Interviews resumed. Search warrants were issued. Redding's personal cell phone, recovered from his locker, revealed frantic Google searches. How to report anonymously to police. How long does it take to trace a burner phone? Self-defense shooting laws. Texas Redding had been preparing for something he thought he could spin into a justified shooting, but why? That question haunted Martinez. Under pressure from mounting evidence, Redding finally cracked. In a chilling, taped confession, he revealed the truth. "I was scared they'd see me as weak. Westlake's too quiet. No action, no arrests, no nothing. My file back in Dallas. It looked bad. I thought if I could just handle a threat, get a commendation, it'd erase everything." Tears streamed down his face, but Martinez felt no sympathy. He hadn't just sought redemption, he had manufactured a crisis, and in doing so, he had taken a life and shattered a town. When news of the burner phone broke, Westlake erupted. Protests doubled in size. National headlines screamed, "Westlake cop stages shooting, kills Chuck Norris's dog, from hero to villain, the officer who lied, when protectors become predators." The Norris family issued another statement. Chuck, voice trembling with barely contained emotion, declared, "This was not fear. This was not a mistake. This was a choice. Animal rights organizations joined forces with police reform groups. A GoFundMe for Rosa's therapy costs surpassed $250,000 in just days. Within 2 weeks, Redding was indicted on multiple charges: felony, animal cruelty, filing a false report, official oppression, reckless endangerment. Bail was denied. When the news broke, Sheriff Martinez felt a grim sense of vindication. Justice was finally grinding forward. But for Rosa, Chuck, and the town of Westlake, the wounds were still raw, and healing would take much longer. Mayor Linda Cartwright called an emergency town meeting. The proposals were sweeping. Mandatory psychological evaluations for all officers every 2 years. Immediate termination for disabling body cams without cause. Max's law. Severe penalties for filing false police reports. Community policing programs focused on de-escalation and empathy. We owe it to Max, the mayor said, and to every innocent soul who trusts us to protect them. The crowd erupted in applause, a small spark of hope after weeks of darkness. Late that night, sitting alone in her office, Martinez reflected on everything that had transpired. She thought about Max's trusting eyes, about Rosa's screams, about Chuck Norris standing tall when it would have been easier to retreat. She thought about the boyish smile Paul Redding once had in his hiring photo, a smile that had hidden a storm waiting to break. And she made a silent vow: never again. Not on my watch, because trust wasn't just given, it was earned, and in Westlake they were going to earn it all over again. If this story gripped you, stay tuned. Subscribe to Storyroom by Rico, because in the next part, the trial begins, and the surprises aren't over yet. The courthouse in Denton County was packed on the morning of February 7th, 2022. Media vans lined the streets. Protesters held signs outside. Supporters of Chuck Norris and animal rights groups clustered on the courthouse lawn, while police unions sent observers to monitor the trial's progress. Inside, tension crackled like static. Sheriff Martinez sat stoically in the front row, flanked by her deputies. Rosa Delgado clutched a small photograph of Max, her knuckles white. And Chuck Norris, steely-eyed and unflinching, sat directly behind the prosecution's table. All eyes turned to Paul Redding as he shuffled in, shackled at the wrists and ankles, face gaunt, his once proud posture now bent under the weight of public disgrace. The prosecutor, Ada Marisol Vance, opened with a forceful, resonant voice. This case is not about a mistake, it's about betrayal. Betrayal of public trust, betrayal of justice, betrayal of an innocent life. Paul Redding staged a threat where there was none. He fired on a leashed dog. He lied to cover it up. And he shattered a community. The defense attorney, a sharp-suited man named Clive Rollins, painted a different picture. Officer Redding was suffering from untreated PTSD. He panicked. This wasn't malice, it was mental illness. It was a system that failed him as much as it failed that dog. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Chuck Norris's jaw tightened. Rosa blinked back tears. Bethany Jameson took the stand first. Her voice shook as she recounted the shooting. Max wasn't doing anything wrong, he was just being a dog. Happy, friendly. I'll never forget the sound he made. Several jurors wiped their eyes. Footage from multiple bystanders was played, over and over, in grim, unflinching detail. Then came the 911 call analysis. Expert witnesses explained how they traced the burner phone to Redding, how he had planted the seeds of the incident. The jury listened in stunned silence. Midway through the trial, the defense tried a last-ditch tactic, raising suspicion against a mystery man allegedly seen lurking in the park that morning. Security footage was grainy, a blurry figure in a hoodie near the playground. The defense suggested that Redding may have genuinely perceived a threat, not from Max, but from a potential human assailant. The implication was clear: reasonable doubt. The prosecution quickly dismantled the theory. Witnesses placed the hooded figure arriving well after the shooting. Phone records showed it was a local teenager cutting through the park on his way to work, completely unrelated, but the brief introduction of doubt rattled the courtroom. Sheriff Martinez knew it only took one juror to hang the case. When Rosa took the stand, a hush fell over the room. Her voice, soft but steady, carried the weight of unbearable grief. I tied my shoe. I looked up. The officer was there. Max's leash was in my hand. Max wagged his tail. And then she broke off, covering her mouth. After a long moment, she continued. He didn't give me a chance to speak. He didn't say anything. Just bang! Rosa's quiet dignity touched the jury deeply. Several nodded, visibly moved. ADA. Vance ended her case with Redding's own words. The taped confession played aloud. The courtroom hung on every syllable. I thought if I handled a threat, got a commendation, it'd erase everything. No anger, no shouting, just cold, quiet calculation. And then a final photograph appeared on the courtroom monitors. Max, tongue lolling happily, leash held gently by Rosa's hand. The image said, everything words couldn't. After just 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned, guilty on all counts. As the verdict was read, Rosa wept openly. Chuck Norris bowed his head, his hand resting firmly on her shoulder. Paul Redding showed no reaction, as if the final piece of his life had already broken long before. Sentencing was set for the following week, but for Westlake, the healing could finally begin. Justice for Max was only the beginning. Don't leave yet. Hit that bell to stay with us, because real change was just getting started. The morning of Paul Redding's sentencing dawned grey and heavy, as if even the skies over Westlake knew the weight of the day. Inside the courthouse, Rosa Delgado sat, clutching a rosary. Chuck Norris, flanked by longtime friends and neighbors, watched with a stoic gaze, sharpened by weeks of sorrow and righteous anger. Judge Evelyn Grant, a woman known for her no-nonsense demeanor, presided over the hearing. Her gavel struck the wood with a loud crack as the room settled into tense silence. Paul Redding stood to hear his fate. Judge Grant's voice was clear and cold. You, Paul Redding, betrayed the trust placed in you by this community. You fabricated a threat. You staged a confrontation. You killed an innocent creature. She paused, scanning the packed courtroom. For felony animal cruelty, filing a false report, official oppression, and reckless endangerment, you are sentenced to 5 years. In state prison without the possibility of parole, and barred from ever holding any position in law enforcement again. A collective sigh swept through the room. Justice, though it could never bring Max back, had at least been served. Redding showed no emotion as deputies led him away. Rosa sobbed quietly into Chuck's shoulder. Sheriff Martinez closed her eyes briefly, whispering a silent prayer for healing. In the wake of the trial, Mayor Linda Cartwright moved swiftly. Westlake's City Council convened an emergency session. Within weeks, sweeping legislation was introduced and passed unanimously. Max's law. Under Max's law, any officer disabling their body camera without cause would face immediate suspension pending investigation. Mandatory psychological evaluations every 2 years became law for all city law enforcement personnel. Other towns and cities across Texas soon began drafting similar laws. Max's legacy had already begun to spread beyond Westlake. Chuck Norris, already a cultural icon, transformed his grief into advocacy. He founded Max's Legacy Foundation, dedicated to promoting police reform, animal welfare, and community trust initiatives. Speaking at the foundation's launch, Chuck said, "Max trusted the world to be good. It's our job now to make sure that trust was not in vain." He traveled across Texas and beyond, speaking to crowds, testifying before state legislatures, pushing for national adoption of measures like Max's Law. His voice, powerful yet broken, moved millions. Rosa Delgado initially struggled to leave her house. Flashbacks haunted her. Nightmares woke her up screaming. Chuck Norris and the foundation arranged for specialized trauma therapy, covering all costs. Neighbors brought meals. Strangers sent letters of support. Slowly, Rosa began to heal. 1 year after the tragedy, she adopted a golden retriever puppy from a local rescue. She named him Hope. On sunny mornings, she could once again be seen walking through Westlake Park, Hope by her side, leash held firmly in hand, her smile cautious but real. Westlake Police Department underwent sweeping reforms, new leadership, new policies, more training in de-escalation and emotional intelligence. Sheriff Ellen Martinez personally oversaw every new hire, determined never again to let someone like Paul Redding slip through the cracks. Every year, on the anniversary of Max's death, the town gathered in the park where it happened. They lit candles, they shared memories, they reaffirmed their commitment to justice, and they remembered a simple truth. It only takes one moment, one choice, to change everything, but it also only takes one community, united in purpose, to rebuild. Justice was served, but Max's legacy was only beginning to ripple across America. Don't miss what happens next. Subscribe to Storyroom by Rico and hit the bell, because this fight for change was just getting started. Max's death had changed Westlake, but it hadn't stopped. There, across Texas, news outlets kept the story alive. The image of Max's leash, still wrapped around Rosa Delgado's trembling hand, became a symbol far bigger than anyone in Westlake had imagined. It became a national conversation. Within months, police departments across the country were reviewing their use of force policies concerning animals. News anchors debated on prime-time television. Talk show hosts invited Chuck Norris to share Max's story with the world. At a congressional hearing on police reform, Chuck Norris sat beside Rosa and testified, "If we can't protect the innocent, what do we stand for?" The room fell silent. As he finished speaking, lawmakers, hardened and cynical, wiped away tears. Inspired by Westlake's legislation, several states drafted and passed their own versions of Max's Law. In California, body cam regulations tightened. In New York, psychological screenings became mandatory for all new officers. In Florida, false reporting by law enforcement became a first-degree felony. Max's name echoed through legislatures from coast to coast. It was more than a law. It was a movement. Max's legacy foundation grew rapidly, fueled by grassroots support and major donations. Under Chuck Norris's leadership, the foundation funded therapy for survivors of wrongful police violence, training programs for law enforcement in de-escalation and animal handling, community building, initiatives between police departments and citizens. Every time Chuck spoke, he made it personal. Max trusted us to protect him, and we failed. We must do better. His words resonated with millions. Sheriff Ellen Martinez became a national figure. Herself, she gave keynote speeches at policing conferences. She advocated for higher hiring standards. She published op-eds in major newspapers about rebuilding trust, but she also stayed grounded. She refused big city job offers. She stayed in Westlake. "My town trusted me," she said. "I'm not leaving, and them now." Her example inspired dozens of other departments to undertake internal audits, to make sure no other Paul Reddings were lurking within their ranks. Meanwhile, Rosa Delgado found peace in smaller ways. She became a symbol of quiet resilience, not through speeches or interviews, but simply by living her life. She volunteered at local animal shelters. She helped children learn about responsible pet ownership. Every year on Max's anniversary, she led the candlelight vigil. Walking slowly through the park, Hope's leash gripped gently in her hand, she would pause at the memorial stone dedicated to Max and whisper, "Thank you, boy. You changed the world." And somehow, those small acts spoke louder than any speech. The story even crossed borders. In Canada, a national news program ran a feature on Max's law. In the United Kingdom, Parliament debated animal protection protocols during police encounters. In Australia, advocacy groups cited Max's case when lobbying for reforms. What began as a tragedy in a small Texas town had touched hearts across the globe. Because at its core, Max's story was simple. It was about trust, about innocence, about the need for accountability in those who hold power. And it reminded everyone that one small voice or one small bark could spark a revolution. Max's story wasn't just national, it was global. Stay with us. Subscribe to Storyroom by Rico and hit the bell, because the fight for a better world was only just beginning. By the second anniversary of Max's death, something remarkable had begun to happen in Westlake, where there had once been grief, suspicion, and rage. A new feeling slowly took root: hope. The town's annual candlelight vigil had grown into a massive community event. Residents planted trees along Max's walk, a new trail dedicated to the memory of lost innocence. The Westlake Police Department set up a trust booth at local fairs, inviting residents to meet officers, ask questions, and air concerns without judgment or formality. Crime rates remained low. Community satisfaction with the police rose steadily. And most importantly, people began to trust again. Not blindly, but wisely, with accountability baked into every handshake, every policy, every new beginning. Sheriff Ellen Martinez continued to lead by example. Her message remained consistent. We earn trust every day, and we honor Max by never forgetting why we must. Among the many touched by Max's story was Noah Benson, a local teenager who had witnessed the shooting firsthand. Haunted by the memory, but inspired by the town's healing, Noah launched Hope for Max, a youth initiative that paired kids with shelter animals needing homes. Under his program, adoption rates soared, and dozens of rescued pets found new, loving families. Noah's motto, "Every leash holds a story. Make yours one of kindness." The slogan soon adorned T-shirts, murals, and even billboards across the state. Rosa Delgado found a new purpose too. She became the director of a local animal welfare nonprofit offering education, therapy, animal training, and advocacy. Hope, her golden retriever, became a certified therapy dog. Together they visited hospitals, nursing homes, and schools. Everywhere they went, Rosa told Max's story, not as a tale of loss, but as a call to action. "We can't change the past," she often said, "but we can honor it by changing the future." Her quiet grace became an anchor for the entire community. Chuck Norris never sought the spotlight after Max's death, but his dedication made him a symbol of principled leadership in troubled times. He continued to advocate for police reform and animal rights, but kept his focus local, working quietly behind the scenes to support grieving families and victims of injustice. When asked why he stayed involved, he simply said, "Because Max didn't have a voice, and because others still don't." His humility, more than his fame, left the deepest impression. Max's Legacy Foundation expanded internationally, forging partnerships with groups in Canada, the UK, and Australia. Max's walk events, community marches to promote kindness, justice, and animal welfare, spread to over 50 cities worldwide. Every year, on October 18th, a moment of silence was observed at noon in schools, police stations, and parks across Texas. To remember, to honor, to never forget. On the second anniversary, Rosa received a handwritten letter. It was from a retired police officer in Michigan who had been deeply moved by Max's story. He wrote, I served 30 years on the force. I made mistakes. I forgot sometimes who I was there to protect. Your story reminded me. Max reminded me. Thank you for giving me a reason to believe again." Rosa framed the letter and hung it above her desk at the non-profit. Because it wasn't just about Westlake anymore. It was about everywhere. Healing was underway. But one last chapter remains. Subscribe to Storyroom by Rico and stay with us, because Max's legacy has one more surprise in store. On the 3rd anniversary of Max's death, Westlake gathered again under soft golden skies for the most emotional vigil yet. But this year, there was something new, something no one expected. At the center of Max's walk, the town unveiled a statue. Cast in bronze, it depicted Max in mid-stride, leash dangling, his expression joyful and free. Beneath it, a plaque read, "Max Bennett, a symbol of innocence, a catalyst for justice, forever remembered." Chuck Norris and Rosa Delgado stood side by side as the cloth was pulled away. Tears streamed down faces. Applause erupted. Even the toughest among them found their voices catching. Max was no longer just a memory. He was part of the town's soul. Later that evening, Chuck took the stage for a few final words. He didn't speak long. He simply said, "Max taught us something we can never afford to forget. That trust must be earned, that kindness must be guarded, and that even in the face of loss, we can choose love." The candles flickered. Hope, Rosa's therapy dog, barked softly, almost as if in agreement, and across the crowd, smiles broke through tears, because they knew Max's spirit wasn't gone. It lived in every reform, every shelter pet adopted, every child who learned kindness, every officer who remembered why they took the oath. Max had changed them forever. Sometimes tragedy shatters a community, but sometimes, just sometimes, it rebuilds it stronger than ever before. Max's story started with one terrible moment, one broken trust, but it ended in something bigger: hope, accountability, love. If Max's journey moved you, share this story. Let's make sure his legacy keeps reaching hearts across the world. Subscribe, like, and comment below. How will you honor the innocent voices that can't speak for themselves? Stay tuned and check out our playlist for more true stories of resilience and justice.